Welcome to another edition of Fight News Now Extra. I'm John Pollock with all of today's news going on in mixed martial arts. We'll chat with John Ramdine and Robin Black about a welterweight bout signed for UFC 183, what champion is looking at a move up in weight, and Mexico will likely get Cain Velasquez in 2015. Among the news coming out of Monday's press conference, UFC President Dana White stated that it made a lot of sense to have Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Werdum fight for the undisputed heavyweight title in Mexico next year, with a target of June for their return to the country. The two were scheduled to fight this past weekend at UFC 180, but Velasquez was pulled from the fight with a sprained MCL and meniscus tear in his knee, which placed Mark Hunt into the main event position. UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones spoke with Brett Okamoto of ESPN on Monday and stated that he is 2 fights away from clearing out the light heavyweight division and then looking at super fights at the heavyweight division. Jones believes once he defeats Daniel Cormier and gets a second victory over Alexander Gustafsson that there will be no argument that he has cleared out the division and would have to be considered the greatest of all time. And the UFC has announced that Kelvin Gastelum will meet Tyron Woodley on January the 31st in the co-feature at UFC 183 underneath Nick Diaz and Anderson Silva. Gastelum is coming off the biggest win of his career, submitting Jake Ellenberger this past Saturday at UFC 180, while Woodley stopped Dong Yun Kim in his last bout this past August. Here with John Ramdine and Robin Black. Lots of news to discuss today, as we do every single day. Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Werdum, it looks like Mexico in June.
Oh my God.
What a lengthy wait here. This is going to be a full, almost 2 years in between. He hasn't fought since we were in Russia at UFC 166.
What I find amazing is that Fabricio Werdum is agreeing to this because, you know, he's no spring chicken. And you look at how many fights he could have between now and June, it'd be at least 1, if not 2 fights, and that means you're lining your pockets. But I understand you run the risk of losing, and then you blow your shot at the heavyweight title.
It's a big gap, though, but at the same time, there's one thing where it's like, I don't want to fight in his home country, and there's very little to that, I believe. Yeah. In Mexico, that's a real thing, where you're talking about completely having to change your training, this guy spent 2 months in Mexico to get ready for the elevation. I mean, Mexico is not a walk in the park to get ready for a fight in.
Werdum has never been a guy who fought a lot anyways. He always liked to space it out. And, you know, hey, man, there's something beautiful about going, this date, 8 months in the future, 7.5 months in the future, is what my whole life revolves around. Not many of us in anything can take 7 months and dedicate our diet and our mental exercises and physical work and everything you do around that date to be at your very, very best. And hey, you know, sure, you could fight one in between, maybe lose your spot, but that one's for the heavyweight championship of the world. I think that's a beautiful thing, and I think a lot of fighters would love to embrace that. Hey, off in that distance, every morning, every night, every lunch, every dinner, it's all gearing up for that one moment. That's a beautiful thing.
No, I totally get that, but, you know, one of the main reasons why these athletes compete in mixed martial arts is to make a living and to make money. And Fabricio Werdum, a family man, has to support all of those people. And I think it comes down to his team. It's like, okay, sure, we might not take a fight against whoever, but a fight against Josh Barnett, I know I can beat him standing, and I know I could probably beat him on the ground. Yeah. It's a safe fight, and I'm not saying it's a safe fight because it's
Barnett's
Josh
mad at you.
Of course, and he would love to rip my head off like he ripped off Dean Lister's head. But I think a fight like that makes sense for Fabricio Werdum because it would still keep him relevant, still, you know, pique people's interests, and I think it would lead up to the fight with Cain.
Yeah, and you do stay in shape too, but this is the heavyweight title. You know, this is the biggest thing, and he's been a space between fights, guys. This makes sense for him, but really Cain, like, you know, the poor guy's body. This is one of the great heavyweights in any combat sport ever, and this body has taken a beating.
And what about the idea that maybe Cain doesn't make it to that June fight?
I mean,
because of his body.
That's completely a reasonable doubt to have with Cain Velasquez, and whatever next injury could pop up for this guy. I think that this is really one where, man, it's almost been 2 years here in between fights. Is there an issue here? Is this just pure bad luck? I mean, you have to train at the elite level but it's a lot of attacks that you're putting on your body when you're talking about a heavyweight who is competing at this level and in the gym with the Luke Rockholds of the world and the Josh Thompsons who they've all had their injuries.
Well, you look at all these millions of variables. Something happened that didn't let the UFC announce their big announcement the other day. You lay out your year, and all of these things work around it, and something can happen. I was supposed to be on a cruise right now. I was supposed to be down in Puerto Rico with my parents, and I canceled it because the heavyweight championship of the world was on this last weekend. And it turned out there still was a great fight, but it wasn't that same kind of thing. That's some guy up in Canada who's got a television show that's a cottage of the UFC. Imagine all the millions of variables in there. One guy gets injured, the whole house of cards starts going.
I know you guys delved into it a bit on 3 rounds this week, but we haven't really touched upon what has been a real big story surrounding Roufus Sport and Dennis Munson Jr. for this amateur kickboxing bout that he had back in March, which resulted in his death. It just seemed a ton of errors that went through that should never have happened on this. And it's really just, it makes you shake your head that this kind of event was put on, a guy taken to the wrong hospital, not taken to a trauma center, just collapsing in between rounds. I mean, it's just amazing that this happened and we have a casualty at the end of it.
Yeah, I know, it is amazing. It's a tragedy, but we also have to look at the fact that it's unfortunate, but a lot of people are pointing the fingers at Duke Roufus like it's his fault that this tragedy happened, and that's not the case. Whatever his practices are in Milwaukee at Roufus Sport, that is between him and any of the athletes that walk through the door. If you come in there and you don't like the way training is going, you don't like the way you're being treated, you can leave. There's a million gyms in North America or around the world that you can go and get world-class training.
In the culture you want.
That's right, in the coach you want.
Yeah, in the culture and environment you want. But the big tragedy here is we're supposed to look at this tragic loss of an athlete and go, what do we do commission-wise? What do we do legislation-wise? How do we protect these athletes? What happened? What happened with the doctor?
How do we ensure this doesn't ever happen again?
The referee, all the people. What happened there? And a bunch of dumb people on the internet are going, well, Duke Roufus's gym, they're meanies over there. Look, man, that has nothing to do with this tragic loss that happened at a show. We need to concentrate on this. We need to look at all the things that went wrong that caused a guy's death in a combat sport and address that.
It's a very complex story and probably a lot more to discuss coming out of this story, which has been covered very well by a number of different outlets. We have more of Fight News Now Extra, and it's coming up momentarily.